Hi everyone. Welcome back. I'm Mara, and now we have the pleasure of introducing Miss Alex Pearson, who is giving a talk about called Neurodivergent Accommodations in Education and the Workplace. Alex has her master's in industrial and organizational psychology and has founded her company, Actually Alex, where she acts as a bridge between neurodivergent and neurotypicals to eradicate an invisible disability stigma, helping each to better understand, support, and validate the other. Alex delivers stories, reframes practical application examples, and takeaway tools through organization-wide or corporate and university, information sessions, consulting services, and digital experience products. She also identifies as autistic and ADHD. Thank you so much.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fabulous. All right, I'm going to share my screen now and just let me know if you can see. Let me make sure it's all working. Okay. So excited to be here. Thank you guys for the awesome intro. Okay. All right, Juliet, can you see me and the presentation at the same time?
I can. We can also see a something in the left-hand corner, like I think it's on your Zoom, if you could try to minimize that.
Okay, well, let me know, because sometimes when I move it to the side, I leave the picture. Am I still in the picture?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. This happened to me yesterday. I think it's because I'm using an iPad. So is it okay like this?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, fabulous. All right, hi everyone. I am going to be talking about a lot of awesome things today. I know I only have 20-ish minutes. I'm going to try and go through this as fast as I can. And I made a couple of guides for you guys, and I'm giving this presentation also as a takeaway resource so that you guys will have this and can get use out of it later. Okay, so I love to start my presentations with the story of Ariel because I think Ariel's autistic. And before I knew I was autistic, I definitely thought I was a mermaid and have always and still am always obsessed with mermaids. So here's how Ariel's autistic to me. Ariel's on this quest to observe, assess, and replicate human culture, right? That's very similar to an autistic individual's special interest being people, being me. And so these are the 5 ways that I explored my world like Ariel and why she was so relatable to me. 1, she was born for a different world than she was meant for. She's a mermaid, but she doesn't really want to hang out with the other mermaids. She wants to study humans. She wants to learn how to human. She loves to collect and arrange her meaningful trinkets in her little cove, and she loves to hang out solo, right? So she has Sebastian, she has Flounder, she has Scuttle, but her friends don't always look like her. They're sometimes animals, right? And for me, that's my cats and my dogs and my unique and quirky friends. So Ariel's quirky, she's goofy and she's lovable. She spontaneously sings and she's decidedly different. But what about her challenges? Here's a couple of questions that I wonder if Ariel asked herself when she was learning how to human. 1, how do people speak so seamlessly with each other? There's a lot in the movie too about kind of like this idea of speaking and non-speaking too, with kind of Ariel's voice being lost. And how does she communicate with people in this movie without having kind of the same tools as everyone else? Why does everything about my world overstimulate me? How will I manage? Why does my body feel so drained when other people seem to manage many activities and relationships and more with ease? Where can I find the rules for conversation? I tend to say the wrong thing, or I talk too much, or I do something silly. And why do changes fill my body with tension and make me shut down? I need all of this extra time to kind of spend with myself to make sure that I'm regulated in the environment. And so here's a couple of pictures of me as a young little Ariel, obsessed with Disney, obsessed with perfectionistic hairdos and things like that. Yeah, I just really relate to Ariel, and I wanted to share that story before going into some more specifics. So I'm on a journey to humanize autism and neurodivergence while creating environments that are so conducive to our thriving and not surviving. I spent 27 years being autistic, ADHD, PTSD, having anxiety and depression, but I've only known those things for 4 years. That's a lot of unlearning and new learning to do about myself. And so I kind of want to give you guys that perspective of going through university and having no idea you're neurodivergent and kind of what does that feel like? And I really want to make the point today that in a holistic approach, accommodations are just a teeny piece of the recipe for student equity. So if we really just talk about things the individual can do differently, that's very medical model-y, right? And so really wanting to shift to this social model approach, we want to think about what are all of those environmental considerations others can make to meet us in the middle, because accommodations are just one piece of it. And so I'm proposing kind of this multi-prong approach of psychological safety, of inclusive professoring, of universal design, identifying our needs and identifying adjustments that map to needs. Okay, so I'm going to start with a story to kind of simplify this idea. So first, we have to understand how our unique experience differs. That's going to help us understand our needs and possible adjustments. I can't tell you how many years I spent thinking my brain was exactly the same as everyone else. And that was a huge barrier for me because I had no idea that I had so many differences in all of these different areas. So one, social preferences, totally different. My way of learning, my interests and my talents, the way I love to communicate, the way I prefer to communicate, and my perceptions of the environment. My brain is overconnected and overworking all the time. So I see and hear and feel everything all at once. I'm going to go into the way of learning piece just a little bit to give you an example. So here's how I learn and think. I create a forest from observing and assessing all of the trees. How many neurotypicals think is they're okay with kind of vague, broad outlines of forests. They don't really care what every single tree is in there and what all the leaves look like. But guess what? I do. And it's the only way I can understand what this forest is. I'm really uncomfortable with ambiguity and vague forests, and I need to know what all trees are in there. So what does that mean? It means I pay really extreme close attention to the details. I need to map out all of these small components before I understand the big picture. Okay, so what's a barrier to that kind of thinking, right? So one of my barriers would be, if all you give me is grass and twigs, how am I supposed to make trees out of that? So my barriers stem from things like incomplete information and mushy and vague starting points. If I'm missing information or the assignment is ambiguous, I'm going to really struggle trying to build trees out of twigs and grass. But guess what? I'm going to spend millions of hours still trying to build trees out of the twigs and grass. So what does strengths-based support look like, having that example in mind? My strength, it's detailed thinking. It's collecting and synthesizing vast amounts of information. My barrier, missing information, an unclear assignment, and no time to flow. Maybe being overwhelmed by too busy of a schedule or not enough breaks or not enough time to process. The accommodation is written instructions, time to ask questions, maybe some additional support, some additional conversation, and a modified schedule. So what does the accommodation do? It removes the barrier so that the strengths can shine and so that the energy and well-being is well protected so that we can sustain and we can thrive. So how did I compensate when I was in college? I really had a big reflection on this because, again, like I said, I didn't know I was autistic until mid-grad school. So I went through my entire academic life mostly having no idea I was different. And so really kind of looking back on that, here are the things I did for myself. I was an excessive note taker. I'm pretty sure I annoyed every other person in class by my clacking keyboard. I write everything. Like I write myself transcripts. And now looking back, I realized the reason I did that is because I auditory process differently. My brain tries to capture everything. It doesn't simplify things for me, right? So I did so much excessive studying and I made myself super stressed, and I don't think it was super necessary. So here's another thing, a couple of things I did. Continuous office hours visits, constant emails and questions to assess understanding, study buddies. I really just tried to make as many study buddy friends as I could so that we could continue to talk about everything outside of class and I could compare all of those perspectives. Do you see how much work and effort we put into this? I mean, it's just insane. And I just want to share a little side note. I've never had any problem becoming friends with professors. I love the academic setting personally as an autistic. Where my issues stem are finding belonging and care with my peers and with professors that maybe weren't as inclusive in their approach. So what did this experience look like in the workplace? Because yeah, I didn't know I was autistic until probably my second, I think it was my second or third job, maybe fourth job. So this is what it felt like in my first job. I had a lot of barriers. So I didn't know I was neurodivergent. These were kind of my major struggles here on the left. I didn't understand hierarchy and chains of command. And now I'm realizing, looking back, like that was because it was an unpsychologically safe culture. So we're so sensitive to the environments we're in, and pretty much everything about our well-being is going to be rooted in the environment and the way we're treated. My sensory overwhelm was a huge barrier. I was consistently burning out because I was so overwhelmed by the environment, by the lights, the noise, and I would go find corners of the building that were dark and hide all the time. I had extreme hyperfixations and a lack of timeline transparency. So I felt like it was expected to sit down for 8 to 10 hours and never stop. And that's kind of like an autistic and ADHD strength, hyperfocus, but we need help with kind of like, creating a different way to be productive, but not kill ourselves in the process. So some of my barriers were no accommodations, unclear and unstructured work, unrealistic expectations, perfectionism, people pleasing, and extreme overworking. So this is really, really important. It's so important that neurotypicals, especially in that we see this in ourselves, that sometimes our perceived weaknesses are actually our strengths in disguise. It's just the way we are and the way our brain works. So this is really interesting. I didn't mention this, but I'm a TikToker. And I asked my audience, I've created these different communities for us to be really open and talk about our experience. It's really wonderful. And here's a couple of things that individuals shared about how they were misperceived and misread by neurotypicals and kind of what they really meant. And this really hit me in the core because I think so many autistic people here today probably feel so seen by these things. So one is being analytical and continuously suggesting improvements and ideas. It means I'm invested and interested. It doesn't mean I'm negative or arrogant. Preferring time alone and declining events is to protect my energy to keep sustaining. It's not that I don't like you or that I don't want to go, but sometimes I don't want to go, but I want to be invited. Being firm on vision and providing criticism and ideas and direction is my way of contributing. It doesn't mean I'm not a team player. I feel like I was definitely misperceived a lot in group assignments just because I love to be task focused. And for other people, I think it didn't seem as fun to them to be as task focused. And number 4, questioning the why or seeking really detailed input about assignments doesn't mean I'm being difficult or that I'm questioning you. It means that I'm looking for full understanding. So understanding our true strengths starts with listening to our neurodivergent lived experiences and perspectives. So stop reading medicalized things that are written without a compassionate lens. Stop reading things about your conditions that aren't written by people that experience and are integrating and accepting those experiences. So here's what happened for me when I learned I was autistic. I found out my brain's really active and overstimulated. It tries to hold on to all the ideas and thought webs. It thinks about everything all the time. And it's very sensitive and is managing input from me at 10x. So here's some things I need. I need stemming. I need predictability. I need to know what people want to talk to me about. I need clear and direct language. I need my instructions written down. I need help with breaking down assignments. I need people who support me in an environment without judgment. I need breaks. I need a place to work that suits my sensory needs. And I need time to process information. So study and learn and affirm your natural ways of being, making it more clear what you actually need. So in my own journey of self-advocating and creating tools for others, what I was doing in this whole process was trying to build some kind of system or process for myself to feel sane. I think it was really just to feel sane. And so I started developing these lists of accommodations, and it was really all these things that I thought that neurodivergent people needed, but I've learned a lot about how pretty much everybody needs these things. So let's see if they apply to school too. So here's 6 collaborative accommodation categories that I've created for my workforce work. And what we can do with these is we can work together. We can work in concert and in partnership with our professors and with our managers to individually differentiate our adjustments. So here's some common categories. We need support with communication. So alternative means of communication, more expectations, more context. We need individual support. So we need some support with our self-care and well-being because we can be really unsustainable in the way we approach things because we don't know what the expectation is. In instructional design, we sort of need help with completing that work by adapting instructional styles. So how can our professors be more universal in their design in the classroom? Job design, adjustments to the job itself or to the assignment that allow those same goals to be met, but don't change the essence of the assignment. That's called individual differentiation. Sensory support are things like changes to the work environment that meet the sensory needs of the individual. And again, this could be providing alternate space or allowing for some, a different kind of approach to classroom management. And in visual support, we need visual or written instructions that aid in addition to verbal examples of expected images. This is kind of that multi-method approach to teaching. Okay, and I know there's a lot of stuff on these slides, you guys. I'm definitely providing all of this information, so don't worry about reading it. Just trying to get through all the things I thought you all needed. So here's some really detailed examples of all of those categories. And again, you're going to get this in a couple of resources that I've made for you today. So your own personal neurodivergent accommodations guide for the school context, it includes 8 different areas of the university experience needs for neurodivergent students. And yeah, faculty and staff. There's neurodivergent faculty and staff too, and they have a lot of the same needs as the students. And what I've learned in my research in the workplace and in my applied work in the workplace is all of these things apply sort of in parallel in education as well. So definitely go through these guides, review your needs, and document your experiences. Okay, so this is what your guide looks like that I've built for you. And I'm going to give you a link tree that has this presentation, that has the neurodivergent accommodations guide, and it also has a creating student equity guide as well. So here's kind of what your accommodations guide looks like. You're going to get a summary. You're going to get all these categories. You're going to learn all the support needs reported by students and staff. You're going to get to make selections, and you're going to get to kind of explore your experience and needs. So I went a little bit further with this idea, and I put in some ideas too about kind of like how we might how neurodivergent people might be self-sabotaging in some ways by not getting things that we need, not asking for help, and some different ways we can apply antidotes to that. I also included a lot of personal experiences with friendships and what kind of friendships created support for me and what kinds of environments were not inclusive to me, because I didn't know that until I was like 28. And I really want you guys to know that earlier. I wish somebody would have told me all this stuff earlier. So I definitely made this guide for young me, knowing that it should be really applicable to students today. Okay, so no, I'm already at my 20 minutes. I'm really gonna I'm almost done. So what other elements combine to create an equitable student experience? It's not all in the student's court, right? It's not all on the person. We have to be met in the middle. So what this looks like is we have a psychologically safe environment. We have inclusive professoring, and then we get to cultivate the psychological empowerment that really sends us far and wide in our lives. So here's the guide that I've created for creating an equitable student experience. It goes over things like how to create psychological safety, how to be an inclusive professor, what those behaviors look like, how to inspire psychological empowerment, what kinds of adjustments actually teachers can make for students to include everyone. It's not just the students making the adjustments and accommodations. I think that we need to flip the script a little bit in this way. And you're also going to get some universal design tips as well. Number 1, psychologically safe environments. These spaces value difference. And I put the reason why there's a mermaid cake is because this is a mermaid themed presentation. And so I'm just trying to show like we're just celebrating the mermaid things. We're celebrating the neurodivergent things, and we're creating space for it. Number 2, inclusive professoring. Inclusive professors are student support advocates and collaborators. And I have like 10 behaviors inclusive professors can do in the guide. 2, they universally design their classroom experiences, and they practice individual differentiation. Now, this is really interesting. So in IO psychology research, these 3 things predict so much trust and commitment. And not only that, but they predict things like task completion, and they complete and they provide clarity, and they provide an environment where everybody is successful and also feels control. So are there 3 ways that professors can kind of adapt these ideas and put them in the school context? 1 is autonomy. So control over the methods and way that the assignment is done and executed. This can allow for more of that divergent thinking instead of just convergent thinking of this is the way we do it. It could be, what are the different ways to approach this? 2, interdependence. Can we facilitate supportive relationships between team members or between classmates, enhancing trust? How can we build more interdependence into assignments and facilitate some of that psychological safety? And 3 is role clarity. How can we reduce ambiguity to drastically reduce stress and ensure expectations are aligned and interpreted reasonably and correctly. I can't tell you how much of my life I've spent just trying to interpret instructions. I mean, it's probably way too much time. So how professors can champion inclusion in their conversations about individual differentiation. So I really want to share this with everyone because I think these are kind of the precursors to getting those needs met, right? And what individual differentiation is it's really employing that social model. So instead of saying like, yeah, these are kind of your issues as a neurodivergent person, it's not that. It's what are the barriers that you're seeing in the way of your success? What are the barriers? Let's identify them. Let's see what's disabling about them and let's adjust them. And the 3 ways that professors can practice this with us is being open. So be open to hearing new ideas and new ways of doing things and be empathetic and compassionate in that support. Be accessible. So make consistent time in your schedule for support conversation. Respond and engage in timely manners to written messages. And practice presence. Be present, be mindful, be intentional in listening and communicating. It's really hard for us to put ourselves out there and ask. And so when we're met with when we're not met with kindness and not met with presence, it's extremely detrimental to our view of self and our ability to advocate for ourselves in the future. Our environment sets us up for success. So kind of summarizing all the things that I've talked about today. 1, model vulnerability and inclusive culture, please. Other people, our professors can do this. They can be kind, they can be human, and they can show us how to be vulnerable and how to be inclusive. 2 is help us demystify your expectations. Practice universal design and individual differentiation. 3, encourage unmasking by supporting it. The most important self-care practice for autistic people is being able to be ourselves and still be accepted. So here's a couple of ways I do this for myself. I make comments about not liking small talk, or I make jokes about how I don't know how to introduce myself. Like, I think humor is such a great way to facilitate understanding and belonging because everybody likes to laugh. And it's like, how can we make it relatable to people where they just understand that we just are the way we are and we're fabulous that way. How to advocate for yourself at school, at work, and in life. Identify, ID your neurodivergence and type, and understand your needs using the checklist and the information provided today. 2, advocate. Find a support person if you need to help you assess and support your needs. That really helps me a lot. I often run things by others, and it just helps me validate what I actually need by saying it again and talking about it. It's also great practice. And 3, apply divergent design. Learn the strengths of your ND and ensure your supports provide you comfort, and not just at work and at home, but in your friendships and in all of your relationships and your family. This idea of accommodations goes beyond everything that I think we've thought of. And I think it goes into every single piece of our life, because the biggest differences I've been able to make for myself have been in my own self-accommodation and my own reselection and changing of criteria for what kinds of people I allow into my brain space. Okay, so here's the link tree. I don't know why this is pasted over. I'm sorry, that's a little bit of an error there, but I made this link tree for you guys. It has all of these resources, tons and tons, but I've made a section on just Columbia student and faculty resources. And so what you get in that is this presentation, you get your accommodations guide for schoolwork and life, and you get the guide to creating an equitable student experience. And please, everyone, read everything if you can, because the equitable student experience is a critical precursor to making accommodations work. So you can go ahead and scan this, or I'm sure we can provide a link or something as a follow, but this presentation also has the links included as well. All right, thank you so much for listening. I know that was a lot of content. I had a really hard time trying to simplify it because there's so much to cover. So I know we only have 5 minutes, but I'm hoping that I can take a couple of questions. Yeah. Okay. Yay.
Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. We've already received some questions before the talk. So would it be okay if we start with those?
Yes, that sounds fabulous.
Absolutely. So one person were wondering, considering the stigma surrounding accommodations, how can we ensure that accommodations provided for neurodivergent individuals do not lead to additional discrimination?
Yeah, So I'm going to give my workplace experience just because that's kind of where my expertise is. And so what we do in the workplace is I've seen a lot of my clients who I work with on accommodations struggle with explaining and kind of naming conditions and trying to explain all of the things that they need. And I think what can be really helpful is kind of utilizing this word neurodivergent. I think kind of utilizing our needs and explaining through our needs and that we are neurodivergent and what kind of experience we have, I think can really help with stigma, because I think we're just not at a place in society right now where people understand what neurodivergent conditions are and kind of the strengths of them. I think that we're still working to understand the strengths and to destigmatize our own stigmas of ourselves and that society has been placing on neurodivergent conditions forever. And so, yeah, I think that the environment has to be conducive to accommodation. And I mean, I guess it's such a hard, I mean, that's a really hard question to answer. That's a really hard question to answer. But I think that I think communicating our needs is so important. And I think that we need to be met in the middle by people that are empathetic. I think it's just not all on us. I think we just are made to feel that everything is on us. And I just don't think that's fair.
Thank you so much. And regarding that, in your opinion and expertise, how can educators or employers support neurodivergent individuals in effectively advocating for their own accommodations?
Yeah, so I think it is so critical for schools and companies to have neurodivergent resource groups. I think that there should be student resource groups, and I think you guys have done such an amazing job starting up neurodiversity at Columbia. And this is the same thing we're doing in the workplace. Like, we're trying to create all these resource groups, and we start by doing these required company-wide or school-wide presentations that teach everyone about neurodivergence. And it also acts as kind of a really effective tool for raising awareness, but also for recruiting individuals to be part of those ERGs and those SRGs. And in those ERGs and SRGs, that's where we can come together, faculty that are neurodivergent, staff that are neurodivergent, and students that are neurodivergent. I think that the power really, these groups get so powerful when we have people across all hierarchy lines coming together and advocating together, because that's how we're going to create the best solutions that are culturally relevant to our schools and our companies.
Thank you so much. And I think we have time for one more question. So in what ways can remote or hybrid work or learning environments be beneficial for neurodivergent individuals?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I totally forgot to plug this. But this past April, or I guess the beginning of this month, we had the first ever World Autism Day for the United Nations that was all actually autistic run, produced, and performed. And so I encourage everyone to watch all 4 parts, and I've linked them in my link tree, but there's a particular individual that speaks at the beginning of the work section, and he says, I didn't realize how many of my chronic stress and chronic health problems were related to in-person work. So the second that remote work became accessible to him, he lost half of his weight and he lost all of his chronic conditions. And he was like, any companies or places that take away remote work as an option, they're discriminating against disabled people, because that really is, it can be the difference between access and no access for us.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate your talk and time. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for having me. I so appreciate it. And I hope that we can get the link sent out maybe sometime after I can.
Absolutely. We can send the links to all registered participants as well.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much. Amazing job, you guys. I'm so proud of Neurodiversity at Columbia. This is so necessary, so important, so needed. And thank you for putting this event together. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Of course. Of course.